Welcome to yet another exciting episode of the Market Watch podcast, proudly brought to you by Africa Economic Development Strategies. I'm your host, Grace Kalawa, and on this podcast, we discuss about Africa's challenges, opportunities, and strategies that shape Africa's economy. And to dive more into these topics and more, I am joined by Africa Economic Development Strategies Executive Director, Professor Mugano. Professor, thank you so much for joining us today.
It's my pleasure, Grace. Thank you for having me.
You've got Zik and you want to own and drive your brand new Toyota Hilux, do not worry. Enigmatic Motors has got you covered for the Zimbabwe gold current is working very well. In the past year alone, we sold 63% of our stock in Zik and our customers were excited. To hear more about our offer, please get in touch with us on 0717 40 9933 or 0717 434 349. We are in Harare at your service. Thank you.
So, Professor, today we'll be answering the questions that were asked by our lovely audience, and we'll be also discussing about the implications of the Iran war that we discussed last week. So, we'll be going to dive more into those topics. So, to kickstart our program today, we're going to start with questions that was asked by Blessing Chukua. So, his question was, I enjoyed the show, Prof. My question is on the stability of the Zimbabwean currency. As the currency exodus of delisting of companies as Zimbabwe Stock Exchange to Victoria Falls Exchange, a signal of how major companies see the RBZ and what are the possible implications of these moves? This was his first question.
No, thank you very much. That's an interesting question, and also appreciate feedback from our stakeholders. Yeah, so I think what is very important to note is that in recent decades, in recent years, the Zimbabwe Stock Exchange has not been quite effective in guaranteeing return to investors because of economic instability. I mean, it's a long history. At some point in time, in 2009, it was closed because of economic crisis. It became like defunct. So we have not recovered fully from the economic distortions, economic challenges. We've come to a point where the capital market, as it were, the stock exchange, has not been efficient and is not reflecting the true value of company value. To an extent that some companies, when they go out to look for capital, listed companies, you know, your report card in terms of your net worth is shown on the stock exchange. So this can't be allocated to the central bank because you can't say the malfunctioning of the whole economy is the central bank. So these are residual issues which are facing. Remember, we are having stability, and you cannot have automatically after stability, then everything falls into place. So yes, these are signs of illness in our economy, and sometimes it takes time for the economy to self-correct. I would want to end by saying most companies in the last 5 years or so, in terms of their net worth, are like 10 times lower than what they were. So, for example, if a company was $3 billion net worth, today we're talking about $300 million net worth. There's been a shrinkage and the erosion and asset impairment on the companies. And the major driver of that has been economic instability, which is characterized by high inflation and the runaway exchange rate. So when you're evaluating a company, you lose that kind of value by 10 times. So yeah, it's not a good sign. You would want to see more listing on your stock exchange, and you don't want to see them delisting. It's a residual challenge of the economy, but not entirely squared on central bank.
So it seems like Blessing have a lot of questions, burning questions actually. So his second question was on Unkemine that said they have NNCDs of over 100 million, which hasn't been paid by Treasury. And he went on to further say, I understand they are different, but doesn't that affect confidence in policy structures and confidence in the industry to the government?
Very good question, but I think we need to know the history, the context. The context is that, and I'm aware of this officially, that companies, particularly in the mining sector, used to lose value in terms of their foreign exchange earnings, what we call exchange rate losses. This would happen in instances where central bank, for example, when a company is exporting, central bank retain a percentage of the foreign currency, what we call export retention. The current rate is 30%. So in actual sense, if you export $1, 30 cents is retained to central bank, and you are given the equivalent of 30 cents in local currency. So this is not appropriation of capital, but basically retention of the 30%, but you are given back what? The same in local currency. So there used to be delays, where I understand it, that when the central bank retains that 30%, they take 2 to 3 weeks, for example, to liquidate the US dollar value into local currency. And that time, between those time of retention and the payment, the rate would run away. But they would be paid at a rate which is of the 2 weeks time backwards, and the rate would have moved. So there's a big difference in terms of the value they're expecting and what they then get. So the reality of the matter is that the mining companies in particular went into agreement with government to say, when our monies are coming through, give us our US dollars, the ZIG component, you keep it. They signed the agreement, and you pay us at an agreed time. That's not for me to say. These are the monies which are our listeners are talking about. And some of these deals, government has gone even into agreements to say we can then do arrangements of settling it through waivers of payment of duty, or when they are doing some capital investments, they can also take on that money. And some of these have not matured in terms of the agreement, but I understood from government. But now, the reality on the ground, the ZIG is stable, and the mining company wants the money. And the government is saying, we agreed. So I think there's also bad faith in terms of the conversation between mining sector and government, and the public does not know these details. And then, if this is an agreement, it cannot take away credibility of the government in terms of the stability and the way they are managing the monetary affairs, because it's an agreement.
Yeah. But does this not also bring trust issues, Professor? And how can these issues be resolved maybe in the future?
When you go into a contractual agreement, you must respect your contract. I understand some of these mining companies want to get off their contractual agreement with government. They are the very same companies who went to government to propose to say, take our ZIG, we will tell you we need it maybe at some point. And one of the critical issues in that agreement was that when you pay us at the prevailing rate of that day. So some of these agreements, the way I understand it, have not yet expired. So how then do you record the agreements they pay me in advance? And now they're using other channels to raise the issue and put pressure on the government. It's an agreement. So it doesn't take away confidence. I think the history where we're coming from, that's where the problems were, which necessitated us to be in this kind of an agreement. But where we stand, I can tell you Central Bank is clearing all the payments on time. And I'm also aware that Treasury pays on time where there are no agreements. But those agreements are the ones which are stifled, unless if anything has changed. But as far as I'm concerned, this is a contractual agreement.
So Blessing has a last question, which he says, the current export, which is on the current export ban of raw lithium. So he says, we do not have the structures in place to support benefiction. How about investments that have already been made by miners towards extraction? How are they going to be protected? And is it not on them that the government doesn't have adequate tech and mechanism to detect smuggling? And is this not a sign of inconsistency which may pause the ZIM is open for business mantra?
Clearly, this is policy inconsistency, because you cannot say when investors come and they are clearly defined terms. Say you are investing in Zimbabwe, you are mining lithium, and you've made that investment under defined conditions, and tomorrow you just wake up and change immediately without even giving a notice for companies to start now moving in that direction. This, I disagree with this policy. it actually creates a challenge for the investment climate for Zimbabwe. There are a number of issues which are arising from this question. The first one is that, yes, we need to, we agree in principle that we need to value add our minerals. It's a common view for anyone with a developmental mindset. But I think we need to look at history. Zimbabwe has banned export of raw minerals, particularly chrome, from 2008, a number of times up to 2022, more than 5 times. In each and every instance, we unbanned. So we reversed the ban. There was a point in time, I think it was 2012, where the pile up of the chrome which was mined had reached $500 billion. And the country was in short supply of foreign currency. And we had to also reverse that. So if you look at that period from 2008 to 2022, you ban and you reverse, you ban and you reverse. It also takes away public trust on government policies. So it's quite right. But again, in the same vein, what you need to understand is that mining is a serious business. It's not like cooking eggs, where you can decide today we are not going to be cooking them, we're going to be boiling them. And then you can switch overnight. There's industrial inertia. You need to invest into the establishment, which can then help us to take that throughput. My view is that it's always difficult. I think the challenge of government is very simple. So it's difficult to enforce value addition and beneficiation in the mining sector, because the miners are coming from a multinational company and from Western and Eastern countries, and their approach is still neo-colonial approach of extracting raw materials and then value adding to their own country. It's a developmental agenda of the advanced economies. So government, through Mutapa Fund, in my view, my humble view, should address this market failure by investing into refineries of lithium, of chrome, of platinum. That's why I like Mutapa Fund, because it can be a disruptive player in that market. I'm aware they're already investing, I think, around Sandawana. But you see, what is coming first is a ban. Right? A ban is coming first. Then you now hear Mutapa Investment Fund is now investing into a refinery. It doesn't work like that. And again, in terms of the process of the ban, what we had first was a statement that government has banned the export of raw lithium and other minerals with immediate effect. Then after a week or so, 2 weeks later, we hear that the cabinet has approved. So it becomes a problematic in terms of the due process. What must start is the law. So again, it sends waves to the government saying, Minister of Mines can't do it without cabinet approval. Can't do it without having gone through the legislative process of having the legal instrument to effect that. But overall, we need to value add. But I would want to argue that even now, we're talking about the geopolitical crisis, which we'll discuss later. But if you allow me just to give you a picture to say, government cannot again ban the export of raw material right now, because we need foreign currency. The risks coming from Iran war, Israel and America are massive, to an extent that the price of fuel, remember our fuel right now is $2.1 billion, $2.1 billion in terms of the import bill of 2025, 2024 going backwards. Now, before this increases, so if we are talking about a 37% increase in the price of fuel, what is 37% increase in the import bill? So we're talking about 700, almost 800 million dollars. So it could be hitting around 3 billion. And we are going to be running down on
maybe just a question of interest, Professor. We're talking about mining. So my question is, why can we not determine the gold price on the market whilst we are the primary producers?
We have no critical mass. In any market, the price are determined by demand and supply. And this is basic economics. So we talk of an equilibrium price. Right. So allow me to be very technical. So you go to Mbare Msika, the price of tomatoes is not determined by a producer in Mutoko. The supply of tomatoes in the market and the demand will then find a settling point. So we are a small player in the gold mining, in gold industry globally. Yes, we have massive reserves of gold, 13 million kgs, so tons of gold underground, which we have as a country. But we have to mine that. But there's a bit which I don't address, but on the lithium, if you can allow me, where you are saying, why can't we determine, why can't we stop the smuggling of lithium? It's very difficult, because inside the rock of lithium there are 17 trace minerals, very important minerals, with a high level of purity of over 99% of some of them, which are used for the automobile industry. So they're in a rock. So as long as you don't process it, you won't see them. So there's a good value, good argument of value add. But I think what is very important, we need to have a proper strategy so that we don't again reverse, because we'll be embarrassing ourselves and also shortchanging ourselves as a country. Yeah.
Okay, so you were just mentioning about geopolitics. I think you were about to get into that. Our last question is coming from Tinash. It is from the last podcast that we had last week. You were talking about the implications of the Iran war, the surge in fuel prices. So he brought up a question, a very interesting one. He said, "Hi, Professor, is the quantity of crude oil produced by African countries not enough to save Africans if we happen to collectively set up oil refineries in Africa?"
I like where he says, if we happen to collectively set up oil refineries in Africa. I think that's where we lack the Pan-Africanist approach to development. It's more of a silo mentality to say, we own, if we have oil reserve, it's ours as Angolians, it's ours as Libyans, it's ours as Congo Brazzaville. These are the producers of oil, Libya and Nigeria, Egypt as well. So the challenge which we have right now is that Africa on its own has no capacity to be self-sufficient in terms of oil. The biggest the country with the biggest reserves of oil, about 46 billion barrels of oil, is Libya, right? And but they're importing a significant share of their fuel because they have no capacity to process crude oil into refined oil. Nigeria is the biggest producer actually of crude oil. They produce about 37 million barrels of oil, right? But you know what happens? They export it to all over the world. They import finished oil, fuel. So this is the tragedy of Africa. And in Nigeria, even if they have the legal instrument to enforce local value addition, to make sure that these oil refineries, for example, the Dangote refinery is one of the biggest refineries in the world, but it's being staffed of the crude oil by their own miners or the companies which are in the exploration of oil. And so there's a lot of cartels and corruption in Africa, which also limit execution of policy. So Nigeria import oil, Angola import over 80% of their oil requirement. So they cannot, So even if we say we want to build a collective effort as African countries to put in refiners, in Nigeria there is a refinery by Dangote. They are claiming it's one of the biggest in the world, and I agree with that. But it's supposed to be getting, it's actually importing some of its crude oil, and it's not running at full capacity. So until we deal with corruption in Africa, until we deal with good governance and build strong systems, we could actually be importing fuel from Nigeria. But Africa cannot present an opportunity for us now as we speak. We'll continue to depend on the Middle East, and to continue to be exposed to the vagaries and these geopolitical risks and disturbances as a continent.
Thank you so much, Prof. I think we still need to dive more into this topic. We're taking a short break. We'll be back shortly. Stay informed, stay engaged.
At Jepnik Investments, we're proud partners in building Zimbabwe's infrastructure, delivering quality road construction, earthworks, asphalt solutions, and civil engineering services you can trust. With modern equipment, experienced teams, and a commitment to excellence, we serve government institutions, property developers, businesses, and individual clients, ensuring every project is completed with precision, durability, and integrity. And now, we're excited to introduce a special promotion. Purchase a minimum of 20 bags of cold premix at just $7.50 per bag, together with Stable 60 for only $2.50 per liter, and receive free labor for your pothole repairs. Together, let's restore roads kilometer by kilometer. Jepnik Investments, building roads, building trust.
Welcome back to the Market Watch, where we dive into Africa's challenges. And as we just before the break, we were discussing about the geopolitical risk. We're just talking about the surge in fuel prices. Professor, with the recent days, we have seen an increase again. Just last week, we were talking about fuel bill on $1.77, and just last week, it raised to $2.17 on petrol and $2.05 on diesel.
Yeah.
What could be the major rise of this increase?
Okay, thanks so much, Grace. So I think the real challenge which we are facing, these are political risks, external shocks which are now being imported by us, or being exported by the crisis from Iran. So Iran, what they did when they were hit by America and Israel, they exported the pain to the global community by closing part of the sea in the Middle East called the Strait of Hormuz. This is where at least 20% of traffic in terms of transportation of crude oil passes through. And that's quite massive, 20% of global supply.
It is.
And it limited the flow of, there's a global shortage of fuel globally, and when there's shortage, price goes up to an extent that the price of crude oil went up from around $64 a barrel to above $100 a barrel right now. Right, so we are importing that as a country. It's a direct cost to Zimbabwe. Over and above to that, Iran has hit one of the biggest oil processors in Israel, which produces over 60% of the country's fuel. It hit also Saudi Arabia, one of the biggest gas producers in the world. And this destabilizes commodity prices of petroleum products. So when we're importing it now as a country, we are import dependent.
Okay.
We also have our own internal issues in terms of the taxes, which I still feel that at this stage, government needs to really look at it. It's a difficult balancing act. But why I'm saying so, because other regional countries are importing. South Africa is importing, Botswana is importing, Zambia is importing, but our price is most expensive in the region. And one of the key issues, I think there are two fundamental issues. The first one is the oligopoly structure. Oligopoly in economics, these are few players. So when a few players, there's no efficiency, there's no competition. And naturally, the cost build-up is not favoring the economy. So we need to open up the oil sector. We're going to have many players, and then have more bargaining power in terms of sourcing and also in terms of the cost structure. That's very important. It has to be a national plan, because fuel is part of the national, it's critical contributor to national economic development. Second issues are the cost structures. I'll give a simple example. And when you look at the cost of the taxes which are being put on ethanol, they constitute close to 90 cents of the cost of the price. In fact, to be specific, 85 cents of the cost of producing fuel in Zimbabwe, ethanol, our own sugar. This is not imported from Iran. Now, the miss from government now, that's where I want to build an argument, was if you rely on imported fuel, they'll tell you we're importing it. But we're not importing ethanol. It was supposed to be a subsidizer, provide co-subsidization to the pricing of fuel, because we blend. So you can't say what you are blending is even more expensive to what you are importing. To an extent that the price of ethanol is almost $2.20. What for? You see. So that's where government need to look at. That should be cheap, even if it goes to 50 cents. Then when you are blending now, it brings down the cost of what? Of the imported fuel. But over and above, again, I want to end by saying, when you look at the cost structure around the imported fuel, which is the direct fuel, diesel and petrol, is close to 50 cents. Going to government per liter. But these are difficult times. Yes, I know government also wants money, but there's sensitivity analysis must be done by government. Sometimes 10% of an elephant is bigger than 100% of a rat. So if they reduce the taxes, right, you can also allow them to get more revenue because oil is revenue sensitive. Okay. If you tamper with the taxes, there is more consumption, but they can still get the same amount of revenue they're getting. But we can debate on the imported fuel, but we can't debate on ethanol. And I think that's where we could actually increase the blending. Now I hear them talking about we want to increase the blending of ethanol. What is it going to save? If it is actually the most expensive fuel, expensive more than the imported fuel.
I think that also brings me to the next question that I have, that should Zimbabwe consider diversing its energy mix, like investing in renewable energy sources? What do you think? What's your take on that?
So we need to pump more of ethanol, but we need to make it cheap. Clearly, we have to take off 85 cents of price of taxes, which are giving a burden to the industry, to the consumers. That is the most effective, and it's immediate actually, because we have the capacity, and we can actually export it to Africa and get foreign currency. So we have to be dynamic in our approach. Why are we not exporting ethanol? If we have a competitive pricing model which actually undercut the regional players, people say, what's happening in Zimbabwe? We say we have ethanol. So instead of government losing revenue and also foreign currency receipts by importing more fuel, we could actually cut the import bill by increasing more supply. Renewable energy, to me, is not something which can happen overnight, because you cannot use renewable energy where you need diesel, where you need petrol or paraffin. We need that in that specification.
And still with implications of the Iran war, we have seen that workers are demanding an increment in terms of their salaries, because I now want $2. So what should be done to the businesses in terms of their pricing strategies? Because I would not mention the shop. I was in a shop during the weekend, and you could see that basic commodities were not in the shops. What should be done by business people to mitigate this challenge?
So business alone cannot do much. That's why it's AEDS, we're organizing a dialogue on centered around the geopolitical analysis which is happening in the global economy on the 9th of April. And we are expecting government and business to be meeting and discussing that. Because one side of the equation cannot solve it alone. Business is a price taker. They use a cost build-up model. So clearly, what do you think business will do? If there is increase in fuel, their pricing model is a cost plus. They're increasing more. The workers are justified because they cannot meet the basic minimum of transport and also and food and accommodation as well. So that's why I made an emphatic submission that let's try to address the major cost drivers. Fuel is the bloodline of any economy. So if we don't address the cost of fuel, Botswana, they have not increased their prices. What are they doing? Because they know that this is going to be inflationary. What you're talking about here is massive risk and contribute to inflation to an extent that we could see double-digit inflation reappearing, and the challenge now becomes a vicious cycle because you have higher increase in price of fuel, you have increase in prices. You are saying things are taking out their commodity from the shelves. They are afraid, in my view. When I talk to them, they don't want to be seen like they're sabotaging. They are kind of strategically observing government, saying, what are we going to do? And there are talks behind, say, look, so they're saving their capital. Because if you don't adjust again the prices, there's asset impairment. You can't replace the stock. So you see, these are difficult times in which we are. So we need to think in a different way. We need to be disruptive. We can't take it as a normal thing to say, clearly, I still want to bring it back. What is it which is causing us to charge ethanol 85 cents as tax? That's insincere. It's a lack of appreciation of what's happening on the ground in the global arena. The Iran war, there's no indication that's going to end tomorrow. because you could see the risks are very high, and we did not know that the Russian war was going to take more than 4 years. It's still going on. So these are times where we really need to wake up and say, which areas which levers can we play with? Which areas can we forego? And we need to do it as soon as possible.
Thank you so much, Professor. You mentioned about the first quarter of the economic review. I think we will dive more into that after this short break. Stay informed, stay engaged.
My name is Mugano, the Executive Director at Africa Economic Development Strategies. We're inviting you to a dialogue, solution-based dialogue, focused on the geopolitical risks affecting Zimbabwe, which will be held on the 9th of April 2026 at Rainbow Towers. We'll be discussing and unpacking the Iran war and how it is affecting the Zimbabwe economy. We've seen the prices of fuel going up, the price of goods are going up, workers are demanding salary adjustments. We need a lasting solution to this crisis in a collective way. We are going to be having presentation from the Governor of Central Bank talking about the economic trajectory which we are taking in the face of rising economic headwinds. We're also going to have a presentation from Minister of Industry and Commerce, Agriculture, Minister of Finance. We're talking to other actors in the market, the energy authorities. We are going to have a presentation from the industry talking about how this crisis is affecting them. At the end of this day, we need to have solution-based resolution, focusing on how we can mitigate and protect our industry, guarantee our stability, protect our currency, and guarantee the competitiveness of the Zimbabwe economy.
Welcome to the last segment of the Market Watch here on AEDS, and we're just talking about the upcoming event that Professor Mugano was saying. Professor, what should we expect into this program, and when is it? Maybe just some brief details about this coming event.
Okay, no, thank you so much, Grace. So basically, we're a think tank as AEDS, and one of our key role is to have evidence-based dialogue to inform policy. And what we are doing on the 9th of April, we are convening a dialogue to talk about the performance of the economy. This is something which is already on our calendar. Every quarter, we will talk about how the economy has performed in the first quarter. We break down all the economic fundamentals, and of course, we look at what are the risks which will be affecting the country, and what is the economic outlook. Whether there's Iran war or no Iran war, that's what we'll be doing as AEDS, because it's critical to inform policy. It's critical to drive the economic development agenda of our country. Now, in this particular instance, in this first quarter, we are hosting the first quarter of 2026 economic review. This is a follow-up to the inaugural economic review, which we held in January. But we are hosting it at a time where there's massive risks emanating from rising American aggression around the globe. Remember, before the Iran war, they were in Venezuela, and now they are in the Middle East. And we were discussing about this part of one of the issues which is arising, which is fuel price. Because that's what we are seeing every day. But there are many risks which are emerging. And I can tell you, the other one is trade disruption. Zimbabwe exports blueberries to the Middle East. Do you know our biggest export destination right now is what? Dubai. It used to be South Africa. Now, close to 40%, if not 50% of our exports now are going to Dubai. Now, you saw what was happening in Dubai. That's being bombarded by Iran. And our market has been disrupted there. Saudi Arabia is one of our export markets for sesame, and other commodities as well. And so people are not talking about disruption of trade. And when we are planning, even government, they are aware of it, but we have a consolidated discussion with proposed solution on how we can mitigate around those possible risks. And you remember this Iranian war, is also going to drain our foreign currency because our import bill is going to increase because of high cost of importing. Why? They're talking about fuel, right? But there's also anything which we're importing as a country. The import bill is going to be increasing. Whether hardware, because they have to carry it through cargo, through the sea, you need fuel. Whether you're going to use the airline to transport anything, whether medicinal, whatever, the fuel cost is going to go up. So anything which you are going to be importing is going to be increasing in value because of the risks of insurance cost and also the war. But also remember, when we are exporting again, we are going to be facing competitive challenges in terms of exports because of the high cost of the local production costs caused by these shocks. Now you compare South Africans with cheaper pricing of fuel, Botswana cheaper, Zambia cheap, some were very expensive. In some industries, fuel contribute about 30% of the cost of production. Go to mining, go to cement producers. So how are you going to be able to compete? So it means again our exports might go down. But there are also some caveats to say this global risk can also present an opportunity for gold prices to go up, even to $10,000 per ounce, from $5,200 an ounce. What does it mean for Zimbabwe? Take into account that 53% of our total of our mineral exports are gold, and 48% of our total exports are gold. It means gold is a major driver of foreign currency again. So how do we play around incentivizing gold miners to mine more gold for us to export more gold and try to use it as a mitigatory measure? We're also going to talk about the effect of the Iran war and other risks on the cost of input prices, particularly in the agricultural sector. Fertilizers, they come from the basin. If you need to cover ammonia gas, it comes from the basin of oil. So if there's an increase in the price of fuel, oil, the price of ammonia gas also goes up. What does it mean to Zimbabwean food security situation? So we'll be having also a conversation with Minister of Agriculture in that platform. Industry and Commerce also, from the Minister of Industry and Commerce, they'll be coming in to talk about what they are seeing from industry and what are the mitigated measures. So we're talking to industry. I'm aware that the price of wheat has gone up by $30 a ton. So that's quite significant. And you've seen the price of bread has gone up to $20, $30, $15, depending on the market where you are going and what is the direction. So we'll be hearing from the chairman of the grain millers, Dr. Tafazo Msarara, speaking about what they are seeing as industry. So it's a balanced bag from industry, from government, from regulators. Central bank will give us a presentation which will give us a tone to say, in the midst of all these risks, are we still staying on the course? And what are the issues which we are expecting? And what safeguard measures are they putting in place in terms of giving insurance or cover or proof to protect our currency from the risks? Lastly, as AEDS, we're going to present our Zimbabwe economic powers. You know, this is our brainchild. This is our blueprint, which we present as a country, as a think tank, which speaks to how our economy is performing. But we also be using our ego's view to advise government as a think tank to say, in each specific issue which we are talking about, what are the risks which we are seeing? We'll also be indicating possible remedies for discussion, and we have a robust plenary which will be made up of economists, captains of industry, debating, and at the end of the day, we must come up with an evidence-based, stakeholder-driven roadmap and mitigatory strategy to address the Iran and war and its possible consequence on the economy.
There you have had it all from the Professor of Africa Economic Development. Make sure you register and you be part of this exciting episode. Thank you so much for joining us today on this exciting episode. For more, make sure you subscribe and stay tuned to Africa Economic Development Strategies. From me and the crew behind the scenes, goodbye.